I thought the certified letter was just a formality, the final stamp on a grief I had spent 2 years paying off in sweat and savings. But when I tore open the envelope in the driveway of the farmhouse I had restored board by rotting board, the words didn't offer closure. They said my sister, Lauren, was contesting the deed, standing there in the cold Maine wind. I realized blood wasn't thicker than water. It was just another thing that could drown you. The certified letter sat on the passenger seat of my Subaru like a lead weight, sliding slightly with every turn of the winding coastal road. It was just an envelope, standard legal size, white paper with a green return receipt requested sticker, but it felt radioactive. I had signed for it at the post office in town. My hand steady despite the sudden, cold hollow that opened up in my stomach when I saw the return address. It was from a law firm I did not recognize, based in Portland. I turned onto the gravel driveway of the farmhouse, the tires crunching over the stone and dirt I had raked smooth myself just 3 months ago. The house stood against the gray backdrop of the Atlantic, a sturdy 2-story structure of weathered cedar shakes and white trim that I had spent the last 2 years bringing back from the brink of rot. The salt air hit me the moment I stepped out of the car, sharp and cold, smelling of brine and wet pine. This was Gray Harbor, Maine. It was the place where I had learned to walk, and more importantly, the place where I had learned to stand back up after life knocked me down. Grandma was gone. She had been gone for 6 months, but her presence was still woven into the architecture. I walked up the porch steps, noticing a loose board I needed to secure before winter truly set in. I unlocked the front door, the heavy brass key turning smoothly in the lock I had replaced the week after the funeral. Inside, the house smelled of lemon oil and old wood. I dropped my keys on the console table and kept the letter in my hand. I walked through the living room, running my fingers along the wainscoting I had sanded down by hand, stripping away layers of lead paint to reveal the honest grain underneath. I walked into the kitchen, where the afternoon light slanted across the butcher block island I had installed with my own savings. This house was not just property. It was not just an asset to be liquidated. It was the only place in the world where I felt safe. After a decade in Boston, managing high-stress construction projects for ungrateful developers, coming back here to care for Grandma in her final years had been an act of salvation. I had poured my bank account into the roof, the plumbing, the electrical wiring. I had nursed Grandma through the hospice stage in the downstairs bedroom, holding her hand when the morphine dreams took her, listening to her whisper about the tides and the birds. She had told me, clearly and lucidly, that the house was mine. It was the one thing she wanted to ensure. Lauren, my older sister, had not been there. Lauren had been in New York, or maybe Chicago, chasing a boutique fashion dream that required constant bailouts. Lauren had come for the funeral, worn a perfect black dress, cried beautiful tears, and then left before the reception was over. I finally sat down at the kitchen table and tore open the letter. The legal language was dense, but the meaning was blunt. Lauren Jackson was filing a petition to contest the transfer of the deed. She was claiming that the transfer was invalid, that there was a prior claim, and that I was essentially squatting in a property that belonged to the estate, specifically, to her. I stared at the paper until the words blurred. It was an eviction notice from my own history. My phone buzzed. A text from Lauren. Dinner tonight? Briartide. 7 o'clock. We need to talk. Abby. She did not ask. She summoned. I dressed carefully for dinner. I put on a blazer and boots, armor for a battlefield that smelled of garlic butter and white wine. Briar and Tide was the most expensive restaurant in Gray Harbor, a place Grandma never went because she said they charged $5 for bread you could bake better at home. When I arrived, the hostess led me not to a table in the main dining room, but to a small private room in the back. It was quiet, enclosed by frosted glass doors. Lauren was already there, seated at a round table with a bottle of Pinot Noir breathing fast in a decanter. She looked immaculate. Her hair was a glossy chestnut wave, her makeup subtle but expensive. She stood up and hugged me, smelling of vanilla and ambition. I missed you. Abby, she said, pulling back to look at me with wide, concerned eyes. "You look tired. Are you sleeping?" I sat down, keeping my posture rigid. "I got your letter, Lauren, or rather, the letter from your lawyers." Lauren waved a manicured hand as if shooing away a fly. "Oh, that. I hated doing it that way. Really, I did. But Derek insisted. He said we needed to get everything on the record to protect us both." "Protect us from what?" I asked, my voice flat. "Grandma left the house to me. We discussed this. You knew this." Lauren poured wine into my glass, the liquid dark and red. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper. "That is just it, Abby." Grandma was confused at the end. "We both know that. The medication, the pain. She loved you. Of course she did. But she knew you were struggling. She knew you were lonely. I am not struggling." I said, "I have a career. I have savings. I restored the house with my own money." Lauren reached into her oversized leather tote bag and pulled out a sleek folder. She slid it across the white tablecloth. "I found this in her old papers," Lauren said. "It is a draft, an agreement she was working on. She intended for me to take the house. Abby, I am the executor of the estate. Technically, if we look at the older will, she wanted me to manage the asset. You were supposed to live there. Sure, for a while. But the ownership? That was always meant to stay with the family line." "I am the family line," I said, ignoring the folder. Lauren smiled, a sad, pitying curve of her lips. "You are single. Abby, you are unsettled. I have Evan. We are thinking about children. Grandma wanted the house to go to grandchildren eventually. Look, I do not want to fight. I drew this up." She tapped the folder. "It is an agreement," she continued. "I take the title. I pay off the mortgage you took out, which, by the way, I was shocked to find out about, and you get to live there rent-free for 6 months while you figure out your next steps. I will even give you a cut of the sale when we eventually flip it. It is generous. Abby, it is what Grandma would have wanted." I opened the folder. It was a single page, filled with legal jargon, boiling down to me signing away my rights for a 6-month lease in a home I owned. "There is no mortgage," I said, closing the folder. "I paid off the last $5,000 of her loan 2 years ago. The house is free and clear." Lauren blinked. The only crack in her composure, a momentary flicker of calculation. "Well, whatever debts are attached. The point is, Abby, you are holding on to something that is too big for you. Just sign the agreement. Let's not make this ugly in court. You know how you get when you are stressed." The implication hung in the air. How you get? The narrative she had spun since we were teenagers. That Abigail was the fragile one, the one who took things too seriously, the one who needed managing. I stood up. I did not touch the wine. "I will see you in court." "Lauren," I said. I left her sitting there, the agreement untouched on the table, her expression shifting from concern to something much colder as the glass door swung shut behind me. The next morning, I was sitting in the office of Mara Klein. Klein and Sato Legal Group was located above a bakery on Main Street, and the office smelled faintly of yeast and old paper. Mara was a woman in her 50s with short, steel-gray hair and eyes that looked like they had seen every possible variation of human greed. She listened to me explain the situation, her pen scratching efficiently on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "Probate disputes are ugly. Abigail," she said. Her voice was rasping and direct. "You need to understand something right now. This is not about truth. It is not about what your grandmother whispered to you when she was dying. It is about what looks believable when money is loud. I have the deed." I said, "Grandma signed it over to me. We did it with a notary right at the kitchen table." Mara nodded. "And we will rely on that. But if your sister is claiming undue influence or capacity issues, she can tie this up for years. And if she has paperwork that predates yours, we have a problem. We need to run a full title search immediately, not just the current status, but the entire chain of history for the last year." She typed something into her computer. I watched her face, her eyebrows pulled together. "What is it?" I asked. Mara turned the screen toward me. "This was recorded at the county registry." She said, I looked at the digital image of a document. It was a quitclaim deed. It transferred the property from Eleanor Jackson to Lauren Jackson. I looked at the date, November 14th. I read aloud. "That is impossible. Why?" Mara asked. "Because on November 14th, Grandma was in the respiratory care unit at Mercy Hospital in Portland." I said, my voice rising. "She was on a ventilator. She was sedated. She could not hold a pen, let alone sign a legal document." Mara zoomed in on the signature. It was shaky, barely legible, but it looked vaguely like Grandma's. "And look at the grantee," Mara said. "Lauren Jackson." I felt the blood drain from my face. I had been sitting by Grandma's bedside that entire week. Lauren had not even been in the state. She had sent flowers. "This is a forgery," I said. Mara sat back, her expression grim. "Then we have a fight. But proving forgery is harder than you think, especially if the document is notarized. And this one is." She pointed to the bottom of the screen. A stamp, blurry but official. I left the law office feeling like the ground was shifting under my boots. I walked down to the harbor, needing the cold wind to clear the fog in my head. I called Nina. Nina Calder had been my best friend since kindergarten. She ran a landscaping business and had helped me paint the entire exterior of the farmhouse last summer in exchange for wine and pizza. She met me at the coffee cart by the pier. I told her everything: the meeting with Lauren, the fake agreement, the deed on the screen at Mara's office. Nina held her coffee cup with both hands, looking down at her boots. She was usually loud, vibrant, full of opinions. Today, she was quiet. "Nina?" I asked. She sighed, a heavy sound that seemed to rattle in her chest. "Abby, I need to tell you something," she said. I didn't want to say anything because I thought I was crazy, or that it was just family stuff. "What?" I asked. "About 3 weeks ago, before you got that letter, I was at the courthouse dropping off a bid for the municipal park contract." She said, "I saw Lauren." "At the courthouse?" I asked. "Yeah," Nina said. "She was coming out of the records room. She looked intense. She was on the phone." I waved, but she pretended not to see me. I caught up to her near the parking lot. I asked her what she was doing in town, and she said she was handling paperwork for Grandma. Nina said, "She said there were some loose ends with the estate." "But Abby?" She looked guilty, like a kid caught stealing candy. "She told me not to mention it to you because she wanted to surprise you with how much she got done." I felt a sharp sting of betrayal, not at Nina, but at my own stupidity. I had been painting the porch while Lauren was filing false documents. I had been grieving while she was scheming. "She lied to you." I said, "She was planting the evidence. I am so sorry." "Abby," Nina said, "I should have called you right then. It is not your fault," I told her. But now I know she was active. She wasn't just reacting to me. She planned this. 2 days later, I sat across from Derek Voss. Lauren's attorney worked out of a glass and steel building in Portland that looked like it cost more than my entire neighborhood. Voss was younger than Mara, slick, wearing a suit that shimmered slightly under the halogen lights. "Ms. Jackson," he said, smiling with too many teeth. "We want to resolve this amicably. Lauren loves you. She simply wants to ensure the asset is protected. We are prepared to offer a settlement to avoid the trauma of litigation." He slid a piece of paper across the polished mahogany desk. I looked at the number, $20,000. It was an insult. It was less than the cost of the materials I had put into the renovation. It was, as Mara had warned, a go-away number. The house is worth $400,000 in this market. I said, "And to me, it is worth everything." Voss sighed, leaning back and tenting his fingers. "Value is subjective. Ms. Jackson, title, however, is objective. We have a recorded deed that predates your claim. If we go to court, you will lose, and you will be liable for legal fees. Lauren is trying to save you from bankruptcy. Take the $20,000. Move on. Start fresh somewhere else." It sounded like he was buying my grief at a discount store. I stood up. My legs felt shaky, but my voice was steady. "Tell my sister that the house is not for sale," I said, "and neither am I." I drove home in the dark, the rage simmering in my chest. When I got inside, the house felt different. It felt threatened. I locked the door and checked the windows. A paranoia I had never felt before creeping into my spine. I opened my laptop to check my emails. There was a message in my inbox from a sender I did not recognize. The address was a string of random numbers and letters. Subject: check the notary stamp. I clicked it open. There was no text in the body of the email, just an attachment, a JPEG image. I opened the image. It was a close-up, blurry and grainy, of a notary seal on a document. I recognized the document immediately. It was the signature page of the deed Mara had shown me, the quitclaim deed Lauren had filed. I zoomed in on the stamp. Harbor Point Title Services. Commission expires 2028. I stared at it. Who sent this? And why? The next morning, I drove to the address listed for Harbor Point Title Services. It was in a strip mall on the outskirts of Portland. Sandwiched between a dry cleaner and a vape shop, the windows were tinted dark. I walked in. The lobby was beige and empty, save for a receptionist sitting behind a high counter. She was young, typing furiously on her phone. "Can I help you?" she asked without looking up. "I am looking for a notary." I said, "I have a question about a document that was notarized here." She finally looked at me. Her eyes darted to the door behind her, then back to me. "We have several notaries," she said. "Who specifically?" I looked at the screenshot on my phone. The name on the stamp was hard to read, but I could make out the first initial and last name. T. Pell. "I am looking for T. Pell," I said. The receptionist froze. Her face went blank, a mask of sudden, practiced ignorance. "Trudy doesn't work here anymore," she said. "Can you tell me how to reach her?" I asked. "It is urgent. It concerns a legal matter regarding a signature she witnessed. We do not give out personal information of former employees," she said. Her voice was robotic. "Is there a manager I can speak to?" "He is in a meeting," she said instantly. "Look, miss, if you have a legal issue, you need to contact our corporate office. We just handle closings here." She picked up the phone and started dialing, pointedly ignoring me. But I saw it. I saw the way her hand trembled slightly. I saw the way the other employee in the back office poked his head out, saw me, and immediately ducked back in. Someone remembered Trudy Pell, and someone was afraid of what she knew. I drove back to Gray Harbor as the sun went down, casting long, bruised shadows across the water. The sense of a conspiracy was no longer just a paranoid thought. It was a physical weight. Lauren wasn't smart enough to forge a deed on her own. She wasn't organized enough to coordinate with a title company. Someone else was involved. I got home and made tea. Pacing the living room, I stopped by the fireplace. The baseboard in the corner was loose. I remembered it suddenly. Grandma used to hide her emergency cash there. She grew up in the Depression. She never trusted banks fully. I knelt down and pried the wood back with my fingertips. It came away easily. There was a hollow space behind the plaster, and inside, resting in the dust, was a thick manila envelope. My heart hammered against my ribs. I pulled it out. It was heavy. I sat on the floor and opened it. Inside were papers covered in Grandma's handwriting, spidery, frantic scrawls. Lauren asking for money again. Says she is in trouble. Men came to the porch today, asking about the property line. I told them to leave. They are circling the house like sharks, and at the bottom of the envelope, wrapped in a tissue, was a small silver key. It had a plastic tag attached to it. Lockbox, Sea Spray Bank. I held the key in my palm. The metal was cold. Lauren thought she had won. She thought the paper she filed at the courthouse was the end of the story. She didn't know Grandma had left a breadcrumb trail. I squeezed the key tight, until the edges bit into my skin. "Okay, Grandma," I whispered to the empty room. "Let's see what you hid." The morning sun did not feel warm. It felt exposing. It glared off the hood of my car as I parked in front of Sea Spray Bank, a red brick building that had anchored the corner of Main and Elm for 60 years. I had the silver key in my pocket, my fingers tracing the jagged teeth of it like a worry stone. I felt like an intruder in my own life, walking into the bank where I had opened my first savings account at 8 years old. Now carrying the weight of a conspiracy I could barely articulate, the lobby was quiet, smelling of floor wax and stale coffee. I walked to the front desk, presenting my ID and the key to the teller. She was new, a young woman I did not recognize, and she looked at the name on my license, then at me, then back at the screen. There was a pause, a beat too long, before she nodded and buzzed for the manager. Mr. Henderson came out. He was a man who had worn the same gray suit since I was in high school. He shook my hand, but his grip was loose, his eyes shifting away from mine. "Good to see you, Abigail," he said, but the words lacked their usual warmth. "The lockbox. Right. Follow me." We walked into the vault, the heavy steel gate clanging shut behind us. The air inside was cool and still, preserved like a tomb. Mr. Henderson located the box, number 402, and slid it out. He set it on the viewing table in the small private room and stepped back. "I will give you a moment," he said. I waited for the door to click shut before I sat down. My hands were trembling. I fit the key into the lock. It turned with a satisfying mechanical thunk. I lifted the lid. The box was mostly empty. There were no stacks of cash, no jewels, just a few savings bonds that had matured 10 years ago. A baptismal certificate and a single, white envelope. On the front, in Grandma's shaky cursive, was one word: Abigail. I opened it. The paper was thin, probably torn from the notepad she kept by the landline phone in the kitchen. "My dear Abby, I am writing this because the nights are getting longer and the house feels heavy with people who are not here. I know Lauren has been asking questions. She calls and asks about the deed, about the equity. She tells me I'm sitting on a gold mine. But she does not understand that this is not a mine. It is a home. I am afraid. Abby, not of dying, but of being managed. I feel them pushing me. I want you to have the house because you are the only one who came back. You fixed the porch. You fixed the roof. You fixed what others abandoned. Do not let them take it. It is yours." I said it to the lawyer. But sometimes I think he wasn't listening. It wasn't signed. There was no date, just the jagged, desperate scrawl of a woman who felt the walls closing in. I sat there for a long time, reading the line, "You fixed what others abandoned," over and over until the ink blurred. It was not a legal document. I knew that. It was a voice from the grave, whispering the truth I already knew but needed to hear. When I finally emerged from the vault, clutching the letter, Mr. Henderson was waiting. He looked nervous. He adjusted his glasses, checked the lobby to make sure we were alone, and stepped closer. "Abigail," he said, his voice dropping to a murmur, "I should not be telling you this. It is against privacy policy, but your grandmother was a good woman." I stopped. "What is it?" 2 weeks before Eleanor passed, someone came in here. He said, "It was a woman. She had paperwork, power of attorney documents. She wanted access to this box." My stomach dropped. "Lauren?" Mr. Henderson pursed his lips. "I cannot say the name, but the paperwork, it looked official. But the dates were wrong. The notary seal looked smudged. We denied access because your grandmother had to be present for the initial authorization of a deputy, and she was in the hospital. The woman made a scene. She said she was trying to protect the estate." He looked at the envelope in my hand. "Be careful. Abigail," he said. Whoever it was, they were very determined to find whatever was in that box. I walked out of the bank with the letter pressed against my chest, the cold wind hitting my face. Lauren had tried to raid the lockbox while Grandma was dying. She had been hunting for this letter, or maybe for the deed itself, hoping to destroy it before it could be found. I went straight to Mara Klein's office. I slammed the letter down on her desk, feeling a surge of vindication. "Read this," I said. Mara put on her reading glasses. She read it slowly, her face unreadable. When she finished, she set it down gently. "It is powerful. Abigail," she said. "But legally? It is almost useless." "What?" I demanded. "She says it right there. She wanted me to have the house. She says she felt pressured. It is unsigned," Mara said. taking off her glasses. It is undated. It is a handwritten note expressing intent. But it is not a will. It is not a deed. In probate court, this is considered hearsay. Lauren's lawyer will argue that Grandma was confused, paranoid, or that you wrote this yourself. I felt the air go out of the room. So it means nothing? No, Mara corrected. It means something. It establishes a state of mind. It corroborates your testimony that she felt threatened. It gives us a narrative to present to a judge. But it is not a silver bullet. The deed Lauren filed is a legal instrument. To beat a legal instrument, we need proof of fraud, not just sentiment. She leaned forward. We need to attack the signature on that deed. Mara said, I am sending the copies to a forensic document examiner in Boston, and we need to find that notary. If we can prove the notary was compromised, the deed falls apart. I nodded, pocketing the letter. It wasn't the weapon I wanted, but it was the shield I needed. My phone rang as I left the office. It was my supervisor, David, calling from the headquarters in Boston. Abigail, he said, I need to talk to you about the Seaport project. I took a breath, trying to switch gears, trying to be the competent project manager who juggled million-dollar budgets and union disputes. I am handling the remote updates. David, I said. I sent the Gantt charts this morning. I know, he said, but the client is asking for FaceTime. They want you on site next week for the structural review. I can't, David, I said, closing my eyes. I told you, I am in the middle of a legal emergency. I need another week of leave. There was a silence on the line, a silence that stretched too long. Abigail, David said, and his tone had changed. It was no longer the camaraderie of the trenches. It was the careful, liability-avoiding tone of management. Look, we all have personal issues, but we need stability on this lead. If you are overwhelmed, maybe we should assign the Seaport lead to Markham, just until you get your head straight. It wasn't a question. It was a demotion. I am not overwhelmed, I said, my voice tight. I am fighting a fraud case. Right, David said. Just take the time you need. We will circle back next month. The line went dead. I stood on the sidewalk, watching the cars drive by. In 10 seconds, I had lost my standing on a project I had spent 6 months building. The stability I had fought for was eroding, washed away by the tide of Lauren's chaos. I needed groceries. It was a mundane task, but I had an empty fridge. I drove to Harbor Mart, the local grocery store where the aisles were narrow and the floors were worn linoleum. Gray Harbor was a small town. Everyone knew everyone's business, usually before the people involved knew it themselves. As I pushed my cart through the produce section, I felt the eyes. Mrs. Higgins, the church organist, was squeezing avocados. When she saw me, she turned her cart sharply and went down the cereal aisle. 2 women I recognized from the library were whispering by the dairy case. They stopped talking the moment I approached. I reached for a carton of milk, my face burning. Abby? I turned. It was Sarah, a girl I had gone to high school with. She looked uncomfortable. Hey, Sarah, I said. I heard about everything, she said. She lowered her voice. Look, I don't want to pry, but Lauren was at the PTA meeting last night. She was crying. Crying? I asked. She told everyone how hard she tried to help you. Sarah said, she said you wouldn't let anyone see your grandmother for the last 6 months. She said you isolated her, that you made her afraid of her own family so you could, so I could steal the house. I finished. Sarah looked down at her shoes. She said you are unstable, Abby, that the grief broke you. People are worried. I gripped the handle of the cart until my knuckles turned white. Lauren wasn't just stealing the house. She was stealing my history. She was rewriting the last 2 years of my life, turning my devotion into manipulation. She is lying. Sarah, I said. Sarah nodded, but her eyes didn't meet mine. I know, Abby, I know you, but she sounded really convincing. I left the cart in the middle of the aisle. I walked out of the store, my hands empty, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I couldn't breathe in there. The air felt sucked out by the vacuum of Lauren's narrative. I needed to see what she was doing, not what she was saying. but what she was doing. I knew Lauren's habits. If she was in town, she wasn't staying at the farmhouse. I had changed the locks. She would be staying at the inn at the Point, the only hotel with room service. I drove past the inn. Her car, a white Range Rover that I knew they couldn't afford, was not there. I drove through town, aimless, fueled by adrenaline. Then I saw it. The Range Rover was parked in the back lot of a nondescript brick building near the old cannery district. The building had a small, discreet sign, North Bay Renewal Partners. I pulled my Subaru behind a stack of lobster traps and killed the engine. North Bay Renewal. I had heard the name. They were the group buying up the old fisherman cottages on the east side, knocking them down, and putting up glass-fronted condos that sold for $3 million apiece. They were revitalizing the harbor, which was code for pricing out the locals. I watched. 10 minutes later, the side door opened. Lauren stepped out. She was wearing sunglasses, looking over her shoulder. She wasn't alone. A man in a dark suit walked her to her car. He was tall, balding, with a posture that screamed corporate aggression. He handed her a thick envelope. She took it, put it in her purse, and shook his hand. It wasn't a social handshake. It was a deal. I snapped a picture with my phone, the zoom graining the image, but the context was clear. My sister, who claimed she wanted the house for family heritage, was meeting with the biggest developers in the county. She wasn't keeping the house. She was selling it before the ink was even dry on the theft. I waited until she drove off. Then I reversed out, my hands slick on the steering wheel. The connection was indirect, just a meeting, but it was too consistent to ignore. Lauren was the face, but North Bay was the wallet. I needed air. I drove to the courthouse to check on a filing Mara had mentioned. As I walked up the wide granite steps, a hand grabbed my arm. Abby. I spun around. It was Evan. Lauren's husband looked terrible. He had lost weight, his collar was unbuttoned, and he had dark circles under his eyes that looked like bruises. He looked less like a co-conspirator and more like a hostage. "Evan," I said, stepping back, "I have nothing to say to you." "Please," he said. He looked around nervously, as if checking for surveillance. I need you to know. I didn't know about the deed." I laughed. A harsh, short sound. "You expect me to believe that? You are married to her. I swear," Evan said, his voice cracking. "She told me she was handling it. She said Grandma wanted her to have it. I didn't see the paperwork until it was filed." "Abby, this is getting out of hand." "Then tell the truth." I said, "Go to the judge and tell him she forged it." He flinched. "I can't. You don't understand the pressure we are under. The debt. It is not just credit cards. Abby, it is bad." "What kind of debt?" I asked. Evan shook his head, looking terrified. "Just, if you can settle. Abby, do it. Take the money Voss offered. Please, before this destroys everyone." He turned and practically ran down the steps, disappearing into the parking lot. He was scared, not guilty scared, mortal danger scared. I watched him go, realizing that the family greed I thought I was fighting was something much darker. Lauren and Evan were drowning, and they were using my home as a life raft. I went back to Mara's office later that afternoon. I told her about Evan, about North Bay. "We need leverage." Mara said, "We need to break the chain of title. We need that notary." Trudy Pell. I spent the evening on my laptop, scouring the internet. Trudy Pell had ghosted. No LinkedIn, no Facebook, no current address. Her number was disconnected. I started searching for older records. High school yearbooks, local news archives. I found a mention in a newsletter from 3 years ago. Gray Harbor Community Theater presents The Music Man. Set design, Trudy Pell. It was a long shot. It was a desperate shot. The next morning, I went to the theater. It was a converted barn on the edge of town. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the air smelled of dust and grease paint. I walked toward the sound of a hammer banging. In the back, amidst a pile of painted canvas flats, an older woman with wild gray hair was building a prop tree. "Hello?" I called out. She stopped hammering. "Can I help you?" "I am looking for Trudy Pell." I said, "I know she used to volunteer here." The woman's face tightened. Trudy? She hasn't been here in 2 years. Do you know where she went? I asked. It is important. The woman put down her hammer. She looked at me, assessing. You are not a debt collector. Are you? No. I said, I am Abigail Jackson. She notarized a deed that stole my house. The woman sighed. She wiped her hands on her apron. Trudy was a good kid, she said, but she got mixed up with that title company, Harbor Point. She told me once that they made her do things, rush jobs, signatures without people present. She looked around the empty theater. She left town after the scandal. The woman said, Scandal? I asked. There was a foreclosure case in Wells. She said, a family lost their farm. The deed had issues. Trudy was the notary. She got scared. She quit the theater, quit her job. She told me she was going independent, mobile notary work, said it was safer to be her own boss. Do you have a number? A forwarding address? The woman hesitated, then walked over to a corkboard covered in faded schedules. She pulled down a dusty index card. This was the number she gave me for emergency set repairs. She said, I don't know if it works, but she is still in the area. I saw her van at the diner in Cedar Line last week. I took the card. Thank you. I walked out into the sunlight. Cedar Line was 2 towns over. It was a lead. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Another email. I froze. The sender was the same random string of characters as before. Subject. She didn't start this. I opened the message. Your sister didn't start this. She joined it. She is a passenger. The driver is the one you need to worry about. Attached was a PDF. I opened it. It was an invoice, a billing statement from Harbor Point Title Services. It was dated 4 months ago, 2 months before Grandma died. Client, North Bay Renewal Partners. Services, Title Abstract, Curative Review, Priority Processing. Subject Property, 442, Ocean View Lane. My address. I stared at the screen. North Bay Renewal Partners had hired the title company to cure the title on my house while my grandmother was still alive. They had been preparing to seize it before Lauren had even made her move. Lauren wasn't the mastermind. She was the mechanism. She was the tool they used to crack the lock. I looked at the invoice again. At the bottom, there was a handwritten note in the margin. Use the sister. She is desperate. I felt a cold rage settle in my gut, heavier and sharper than the grief. They had targeted Lauren. They had found her debts, her weakness, and they had handed her the weapon to kill our family. I got in my car. I wasn't just fighting for a house anymore. I was fighting a machine that ate people like us for breakfast. I put the car in gear. I was going to Cedar Line. I was going to find Trudy Pell. And I was going to make her talk, even if I had to tear the truth out of her throat. The legal system, I was quickly learning, did not function on truth. It functioned on paperwork, momentum, and the brutal efficiency of character assassination. 2 days after I found the invoice connecting my sister to North Bay Renewal Partners, Mara Klein filed our initial motions for discovery. We asked for everything: the original deed, the notary's logbook, Lauren's communications with the title company, and the metadata from the electronic filing. It was a standard opening volley, a demand for the cards to be laid on the table. The response from Derek Voss arrived 48 hours later, and it was not a stack of documents. It was a declaration of war. I sat in Mara's office, the rain drumming against the window pane, as she slid the letter across her desk. She looked angry, not the professional, detached annoyance of a lawyer dealing with a difficult opponent, but the genuine irritation of a woman who hated bullies. Read the second paragraph. Mara said, I looked at the heavy cream-colored stationery, Voss and Harland. The font was sharp, serifed, authoritative. In light of the plaintiff's well-documented history of emotional distress following the decease of the decedent, the defense requests full access to Ms. Abigail Jackson's medical and therapeutic records for the past 3 years. It is our position that the plaintiff's recollection of events regarding the estate is compromised by grief-induced instability and potential cognitive dissonance. We intend to demonstrate that the plaintiff's claims of a verbal agreement are the result of a psychological inability to accept the decedent's true wishes. I felt the air leave my lungs. They want my therapy records? I asked. My voice sounded small in the quiet office. Mara nodded grimly. They are trying to paint you as an unreliable narrator. Abigail, they want to argue that you are so broken by your grandmother's death that you hallucinated her promises. They want to say you are crazy. I stared at the words, emotional instability. I had seen a grief counselor for 6 months after Grandma died. We had talked about the loneliness of the house, the pressure of my job in Boston, the feeling that I was the only one carrying the memory of our family. I had cried in that office. I had been vulnerable. Now, Derek Voss wanted to take those moments of private pain and turn them into evidence that I was unfit to own property. This is relevant? I asked, feeling a flush of heat climb up my neck. No, Mara said sharply. It is a fishing expedition. It is intimidation disguised as procedure. He knows I will fight it. He knows a judge is unlikely to grant it without a compelling reason. But he put it in writing to rattle you. He wants you to feel exposed. He wants you to think that if you proceed, your entire life will be dissected on a public table. It is working. I said, do not let it work. Mara said. She leaned forward, her eyes hard. This tells me they are scared. If they had solid proof the deed was legitimate, they would just produce the deed. Instead, they are attacking the accuser. It is a classic deflection strategy. We are going to file a motion for a protective order. We are going to tell Mr. Voss that your mental health is none of his business. I left the office, but the feeling of violation followed me. I drove back to the farmhouse in silence. The rain had turned the dirt road to mud, and the tires spun slightly as I climbed the hill. I walked into the house and locked the door. I stood in the hallway, listening to the silence. Was I unstable? I had been talking to an empty room the other night. I had been obsessively tracking down a missing notary. I had been stalking my sister. I went into the kitchen and gripped the edge of the counter. No, that was what they wanted. They wanted me to doubt my own reality. It was a sophisticated form of gaslighting, administered via legal brief. I was not crazy. I was the only person in this entire equation who was telling the truth. But the seed had been planted. I found myself checking the locks 3 times. I checked the stove. I checked the windows. I felt the paranoia tightening around my chest like a vice. If I made one mistake, one public slip-up, Voss would be there to point a finger and say, "See? She is cracking." I needed an anchor. I needed someone who knew the truth of this family before the lawyers got involved. I drove to the west side of town, to a small, tidy cottage with a garden that was defying the coming winter. Dr. Elise Warren lived there. She was a retired pediatrician and had been Grandma's best friend for 40 years. They had played bridge every Tuesday until Grandma got too sick to hold the cards. Elise opened the door before I could knock. She was 80, tiny and bird-like, but her eyes were sharp behind her oversized glasses. "Abigail," she said, "I was wondering when you would come." She made tea in a pot that I recognized from my childhood. We sat in her living room, surrounded by shelves of books and photos of grandchildren. "I heard about the court case," Elise said gently. "News travels fast in Gray Harbor. People are saying cruel things. They say I am suing my sister because I am greedy." I said, "And now they are saying I am mentally unstable." Elise set her cup down with a clatter. "That is nonsense. Eleanor was the most practical woman I ever knew, and she raised you to be the same." "Elise," I asked, leaning forward, "did Grandma ever talk to you about the house? In the end?" Elise looked out the window at the gray sky. "She talked about it constantly. She said she was terrified." "Abby, terrified of what?" "Of losing it." Elise said, "She told me Lauren had been calling her, asking for money, then asking for the deed. Lauren told her she needed collateral for a business loan. She said if Eleanor didn't help, she would lose everything. Eleanor cried right here on this sofa. She said, 'I cannot give her the house, Elise. If I give it to her, she will sell it. And then where will Abigail go?'" I felt a lump form in my throat. "She said that?" "She did." Elise affirmed, She told me she signed the house over to you because you were the one who put the roof back on. She said, Abigail understands the soil. Lauren only understands the sale. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Will you testify to that? I asked. Elise looked at me, her expression fierce. Just tell me when and where. I will not let them put words in Eleanor's mouth now that she is not here to defend herself. I left Elise's cottage feeling lighter. I wasn't imagining the narrative. It was real. Grandma had protected me, and now I had to protect her decision. My phone rang as I was driving back. It was Mara. We got the report back from the forensic document examiner. She said, her voice was brisk, stripped of emotion. And? I asked. It is complicated, Mara said. The signature matches your grandmother's style. The slant, the spacing, the letter formation. To a layperson, it looks perfect. My heart sank. So it is real? No, Mara said. It is too perfect. The examiner found microscopic evidence of tracing pressure. What does that mean? It means someone likely used a light box or a projection method to trace a genuine signature onto the deed. Mara explained, when people write naturally, the pen moves fluidly, there are variations in pressure, speed lines. When someone traces, they move slower, they hesitate. The microscope shows pen lifts, tiny stops where the hand paused to check the line. It is a drawing of a signature. Abigail, not a signature. It is a forgery. I said, it is a high-quality forgery. Mara corrected. But yes, it confirms your theory. The problem is proving who did it. Lauren? The notary? Someone at the title company? We can prove the document is bad, but we need to link it to the actor. I hung up, my mind racing. A trace signature. It required access to a real signature. Lauren had plenty of old birthday cards, checks, letters. She could have done it, or she could have given a sample to someone else. I got back to the house and went into the office, the small room off the kitchen where I kept my own files. I needed to look at everything again. I logged into the County Registry of Deeds website. I had bookmarked the page for my property. I wanted to look at the forged deed again, to see if I could spot the hesitation marks Mara mentioned. I pulled up the file, Book 4502, page 112. I scrolled down, then I stopped. There was a new entry. It was dated 3 days ago. Notice of Leanne. I clicked it open. Lender, Dunridge Lending Group. Borrower, Lauren Jackson. Collateral, 442, Ocean View Lane. Amount, $150,000. I stared at the screen, blinking. A lien? It was listed as a home improvement loan. I had not taken out a loan. I was the one living in the house. Lauren didn't have keys. She hadn't improved anything. She hadn't stepped foot inside since the funeral. And yet, here was a recorded document stating that the house, my house, was now collateral for a $150,000 debt. If Lauren lost the court case, if the deed was overturned, what happened to the lien? I called Mara back immediately. She didn't answer. It was after 6 o'clock. I left a frantic voicemail. They are cashing out. I said into the phone, they are extracting the equity before the judge can even rule. Mara, they are draining the house dry. I paced the kitchen. This was why Voss offered me $20,000. This was why they were stalling with discovery requests for therapy records. They needed time. Every day the case dragged on was another day they could leverage the title to secure more cash. I heard a car in the driveway. I looked out. It was Nina's truck. She walked in without knocking, carrying a pizza box, but her face was pale. She looked like she had been crying. I know about the lien, I said, assuming she had seen it online. Nina stopped. What lien? The loan. I said, Lauren took out $150,000 against the house. Nina dropped the pizza box on the table. Oh my God, Abby, I have to tell you something else. She sat down, pulling at a loose thread on her jacket. Remember when I told you I saw Lauren at the courthouse? She asked. Yes, I didn't tell you the whole thing, Nina said. Her voice was shaking. I didn't just see her. I heard her. She was in her car. The window was down. She was on the phone with someone. She was sobbing. Abby, full-on breakdown. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. Because I thought it was marriage drama, Nina cried. I thought she and Evan were splitting up. I didn't want to gossip about her being hysterical, but I heard what she said. What did she say? I asked, walking over to her. She said, they said they would ruin us if I didn't cooperate. She said, I can't do it anymore. Please don't make me go back in there. Nina looked up at me, her eyes wide. She sounded terrified. Abby, not greedy, terrified. Like someone had a gun to her head. It matched what Evan had said. I didn't know about the deed until it was filed. And the note on the invoice, use the sister. Lauren was not the general of this army. She was a soldier who had been drafted against her will, but that didn't change the fact that she was the one pulling the trigger. I need to see her. I said, you can't. Nina said, her lawyer will eat you alive. I don't care about her lawyer. I said, I need to look her in the eye. I knew where she would be. Whenever Lauren was stressed, truly stressed, she went to the water, not the beach. That was for tourists. She went to Saltwind Pier, the old industrial dock where the fishing boats unloaded. It was where we used to go as teenagers to smoke cigarettes and complain about our parents. I drove there. It was dark, the sodium lights casting an orange glow over the black water. Her white Range Rover was parked at the end of the pier. I parked behind her, blocking her in. I got out. The wind was brutal here, stripping the heat right out of my skin. Lauren was standing at the railing, looking down at the oil-slicked water. She wore a heavy wool coat, wrapped tight. She didn't turn when I approached. She knew it was me. It is cold. Abby, she said. Her voice was snatched away by the wind. You took out a loan. I said, $150,000. Lauren turned then. Her face was gaunt. The polished, beautiful sister from the restaurant was gone. She looked old. I had to. She said, you didn't have to steal my house. Lauren, your house? She snapped. Suddenly, the fear in her face was replaced by a flash of pure, hot resentment. It is always your house, isn't it? Just like it was your grandmother. Just like it was your grief that mattered. What are you talking about? I asked. You think you are so perfect, Lauren said, stepping closer. The dutiful Abigail, the one who stayed, the one who fixed the roof. You think that makes you better than me? You think that gives you the right to everything? I took care of her, I shouted over the wind, while you were playing fashion designer in New York. I was trying to build a life, Lauren screamed back. I was trying to be something other than Eleanor Jackson's granddaughter. But you just camped out here. You took the easy road. Abby, you hid in this town, and you got all the love for it. Grandma looked at you like you were a saint. She looked at me like I was a mistake. This wasn't about the money. Not entirely. This was the ancient wound, the scoreboard of affection that siblings keep in their heads for decades. So you punish me? I asked. By forging a deed? By letting some development company tear down her legacy? Lauren laughed. A brittle, cracking sound. You think I care about the legacy? It is wood and siding. Abby, it is rot. I needed the money. Yes, I am in trouble. Evan is in trouble. But taking this from you, finally having something that is mine, that felt good. For a minute, it felt like I finally won. She looked at me, her eyes wet and wild. But you can't win. Abby, you don't know who you are fighting. Who am I fighting? Lauren? I asked. Tell me who R is. Tell me about North Bay. She flinched. She stepped back, her hand going to her mouth. How do you know about that? She whispered. Because I am not the idiot you think I am. I said, I know about the invoice. I know about the pressure. Just tell me the truth, and we can fix this. We can go to the police. Lauren shook her head violently. No police. She said, you don't understand. They don't just sue you. Abby, they make things disappear. She pushed past me, running to her car. Lauren, I yelled. She scrambled into the driver's seat. She had to drive over the curb to get around my Subaru. The Range Rover bottomed out with a sickening crunch of metal on concrete. But she didn't stop. She sped away, taillights blurring in the mist. I stood alone on the pier, the smell of dead fish and diesel fuel filling my nose. She had admitted it, the resentment, the debt, the fear, but she wouldn't stop. She was too deep in the hole. I went back to the legal work. It was the only way to fight chaos, with order. The next day, Mara called me into her office again. We found something else. She said, she pulled up the digital file of the deed again. This is the document we have been fighting over, she said. Recorded November 14th, book 4502, page 112. Yes, I said. Now look at this. She clicked a folder. Another image appeared on the screen. This is a cached version of the same page, captured by a third-party real estate data scraper 2 days after the filing. She said, I looked. It was the same deed, same date, same signature, same notary stamp. Trudy Pell. But something was different. Look at the file stamp sequence number at the top right. Mara said, I squinted. The number on the current official deed was SEQ 9990234. The number on the cached version was SEQ 990231. They are different. I said, exactly. Mara said, and look at the witness signature on the cached version. It is a legible scrawl. Now look at the official one. The witness signature on the official deed was clear. Susan Miller. They swapped it. I whispered. It is called a curative filing, Mara said, her voice disgusted. Title companies do it to fix clerical errors. If a signature is missing, or a date is wrong, they file a correction. But usually, that correction is marked as a correction deed. This was a substitution. They went into the electronic system, deleted the first scan because maybe the witness signature looked too fake or was missing, and uploaded a better forged version under a new sequence number. How is that possible? I asked. That is the county registry. It is supposed to be secure. It is secure, Mara said. Unless you have someone on the inside, or unless you are a licensed title agent with administrative upload privileges. Harbor Point. I said, they didn't just forge the deed, Mara said. They edited the public record after the fact to clean up their sloppy work. This is racketeering. Abigail, we had the smoking gun. The discrepancy in the sequence numbers proved manipulation of the official record. I went home, feeling a grim sense of progress. We had them. We just needed to connect the dots between Harbor Point, North Bay, and Lauren. It was 11 o'clock at night. The wind was howling around the farmhouse, rattling the windows in their frames. I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the blurry photo of Trudy Pell's notary stamp. My phone buzzed. It was a blocked number. No caller ID. I stared at it. My heart rate spiked. I picked it up. Hello? There was silence on the other end. Just the sound of breathing. Quick, shallow breaths. Hello? I said again. Is this Abigail Jackson? The voice was a whisper. Female. Trembling. Yes, I said. Who is this? You have been asking about me, the voice said. At the theater. At the diner. You need to stop asking. Trudy? I asked. Is this Trudy Pell? Stop saying my name, she hissed. You don't know what you are doing. I know you notarized a dead woman's signature. I said, I know you swapped the files. I didn't have a choice. She whimpered. It sounded like she was crying. They said it was routine. They said the old lady signed it earlier and they just needed the stamp. I didn't know she was dying. You can fix this. Trudy, I said, keeping my voice calm. Just talk to me. Tell me who gave you the document. I can't, she said. They are watching. Who is watching? The people behind your sister, she said. They don't like loose ends. Ms. Jackson, and I am a loose end. And now, so are you. I gripped the phone tight. If you don't talk to me, I will have the police find you. I said, and then you go to jail for fraud. If you help me, I can protect you. There was a long pause. You can't protect me, she said. But I can't live with this anymore. I saw what they did to the last family. Meet me, I said. Cedar Lane Diner, she whispered. Tomorrow, 7 a.m. Come alone. If I see a lawyer or a cop, I run, and I disappear for good. The line went dead. I sat in the dark kitchen, the silence of the house pressing in on me. The game had changed. It wasn't just a lawsuit anymore. I was meeting a woman who claimed to be hunted, to expose a syndicate that erased property lines and people with equal efficiency. I looked at the key to the lockbox sitting on the table. Grandma had left me a letter. Trudy was offering me the truth. I would be at the diner at 7, and I would bring a recorder, because if something happened to me, or to Trudy, I needed the story to survive us both. The Cedar Line Diner sat on the edge of the state highway, a chrome and neon relic that smelled permanently of bacon grease and burnt coffee. It was 7 o'clock in the morning, the peak of the breakfast rush for truckers and third-shift workers ending their nights. The noise was a protective blanket, a clatter of silverware, the hiss of the griddle, and the low hum of conversations that no one was listening to. I sat in a booth near the back, watching the door. I had my phone on the table, the voice memo app open. My hands were wrapped around a mug of black coffee, absorbing the heat, trying to stop the tremor that had started the moment I woke up. At 7:10, the door opened. A woman stepped in, looking like she wanted to turn around and run. She wore a heavy parka that was too big for her and a knit hat pulled low. She scanned the room with the frantic, darting eyes of a trapped animal. It was the woman from the theater photo. Older now, more tired, but definitely Trudy Pell. I raised my hand slightly. She saw me, hesitated, and then walked over, sliding into the booth opposite me. She didn't take off her coat. She kept her hands jammed in her pockets. "You came," I said. "I almost didn't." She said. Her voice was scratchy, like she had been smoking or crying. I pushed the menu aside. "I am going to record this. Trudy, for my lawyer, and for your protection. If we have your statement on record, they can't intimidate you into silence because the truth will already be out." She stared at the phone. "Is it on?" I tapped the red button. "It is on." She took a deep breath, her chest hitching. "State your name," I said gently. "Trudy Pell," she whispered. "And you were a notary public employed by Harbor Point Title Services?" "Yes." "Trudy," I asked, leaning in, "did you witness the signature of Eleanor Jackson on a quitclaim deed dated November 14th? Trudy looked down at the Formica table, tracing a scratch in the laminate with her thumb. "I stamped it," she said. "Did you see her sign it?" "No." The word hung in the air, heavy and absolute. "Tell me what happened." I said, "It was a Tuesday." Trudy said, the words spilling out fast now that the dam had broken. "My supervisor, Mr. Rourke, came to my desk. He had a file. He said it was a rush job for a priority client. North Bay Renewal. He said the grantor, your grandmother, had signed the papers earlier that morning at her home, but the mobile notary forgot to bring the stamp. He said it was just a technicality, routine estate paperwork. He told me to notarize it so they could get it to the registry before closing." "Mr. Rourke?" I asked. "Calvin Rourke?" She nodded. "He ran the Special Projects Division. We weren't allowed to ask questions about his files. He said if I didn't stamp it, the deal would fall through and the company would lose the North Bay account," he said. "He said I would be responsible." "And you believed him?" "I needed the job," she said, her voice cracking. "I have a sick mother, the health insurance. I couldn't lose it. I thought, it is just one signature. Who gets hurt? I didn't know she was in the hospital. I didn't know she was dying." She looked up at me, her eyes wet. "I swear. Ms. Jackson, I thought she wanted to sell. I believed her. She wasn't a villain. She was a cog in a machine that ground people up for profit. But then she said the next thing, and my sympathy curdled into something colder. Was that it?" I asked. "Just the stamp?" Trudy looked away again. She bit her lip. "No." She said, "What else?" About 2 weeks later, she said, "After your grandmother passed, Lauren came in." "My sister?" "Yes." Rourke brought her into the conference room. I was filing in the hallway. I heard them. "What did you hear?" Rourke was angry. Trudy said, "He was saying the original filing had a problem. Something about the witness line being blank or messy. He said they needed to fix it before the title search flagged it. He told Lauren she needed to sign a curative affidavit, and she needed to sign the deed again. I froze. Wait, you are saying Lauren signed the deed? Trudy nodded miserably. Rourke put the document in front of her. He said, "We are just cleaning up the record. Lauren, if you don't do this, the loan falls through and you don't get the payout." I watched her. Ms. Jackson. She was shaking. She was crying, but she picked up the pen. She traced the signature. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. I thought Lauren was just the beneficiary of a forgery. I thought she was willfully blind. But this was active participation. She had sat in a conference room and traced our dead grandmother's name onto a legal document to secure a loan. She wasn't just a pawn, she was a co-conspirator. "And then?" I asked, my voice hollow. Then Rourke gave me the new page. Trudy said, "And he told me to upload it to the registry. He gave me the administrator code to swap the files. That is why the sequence numbers don't match." We deleted the first one and replaced it with the one Lauren traced. She reached across the table and grabbed my wrist. Her hand was ice cold. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I am so sorry." I stopped the recording. I looked at this woman, broken by her own compliance. "You need to go to the police. Trudy." I said, "I can't," she said, pulling back. "Rourke knows people, powerful people. If I go to the police, I am dead. If you don't," I said, "you are going to prison. Because I am taking this recording to a judge. And when the subpoena comes, you can either be a witness for me or a defendant with them." Trudy stood up. She looked terrified. "I have to go," she said. "Don't tell them I talked to you. Please." She ran out of the diner before I could stop her. I sat there, the phone heavy in my hand, staring at the congealing coffee. Lauren had traced the signature. My sister had looked at Grandma's name and overwritten it with a lie. I drove straight to Mara's office. I didn't even call first. I played the recording for her. Mara listened, her face hardening with every sentence. When it finished, she didn't say anything for a long moment. She just stared at the wall, tapping her pen against the desk. "We have them," she said finally. "This proves fraud." I said, "It proves everything." Mara said, "It proves the forgery, the conspiracy, the cover-up. It links Harbor Point directly to the crime." She pulled her keyboard toward her. "I am filing an emergency motion to compel," she said. "We are going to demand every single email, log entry, and metadata file from Harbor Point. We are going to specifically name Calvin Rourke," she typed furiously. "But Abigail," she said, pausing, "you understand what this means for Lauren?" I looked at the floor. Trudy said Lauren traced the signature. Mara said, "That is not just benefiting from a crime, that is committing one. Forgery, uttering a false instrument. If this comes out in court, the judge is obligated to refer it to the district attorney. Lauren could go to prison." I felt a wave of nausea. I hated what Lauren had done. I hated the greed, the betrayal. But prison? She was my sister. She was the girl who used to braid my hair when we were kids. "Does it have to be criminal?" I asked. "Can't we just win the house back?" Mara looked at me with sympathy, but her eyes were steel. "We can try to keep it civil," she said, "but once you introduce evidence of a felony into a courtroom, you lose control of the outcome. The state takes over. You need to decide right now. Abigail, are you ready to destroy her to save the house? Because that is the choice." I thought about the letter in the lockbox. "You fixed what others abandoned." "Do it," I said. "File the motion." 2 days later, the response from Harbor Point's legal team arrived. It was a masterpiece of corporate evasion. Mara read the email aloud, her voice dripping with sarcasm, regarding the plaintiff's request for internal communication logs dating from October to December. Harbor Point Title Services regrets to inform the court that due to a significant server migration and system update conducted in January, certain legacy data files were corrupted and are currently irretrievable. We are working with IT specialists to attempt recovery, but at this time, no such records exist. I stood up and paced the small office. They deleted them. I said, "They knew we were coming and they wiped the servers." "Of course they did." Mara said, System migration. It is the oldest excuse in the book. It is too convenient to be a coincidence. So we are stuck? I asked. No, Mara said. Spoliation of evidence is a serious sanction. If we can prove they deleted it on purpose, the judge can instruct the jury to assume the worst. But we need a link. We need something they couldn't delete. That evening, I was at the farmhouse, trying to fix a leak under the kitchen sink. The physical work usually calmed me, but my hands were shaking too much to hold the wrench. There was a knock on the back door. I froze. It was dark. No one came to the back door unless they knew the house. I picked up the heavy wrench and walked to the door. I flipped on the porch light. It was Evan. He was wearing a hoodie, hood up, looking over his shoulder at the driveway. He looked like a fugitive. "Open up, Abby," he said through the glass. "Please." I unlocked the door but kept the chain on. "What do you want?" "Evan?" He held up his hand. In his palm was a small black flash drive. "I brought you the link," he said. I undid the chain and let him in. He stepped into the kitchen, bringing the smell of cold air and stale cigarettes with him. He didn't sit down. He stood by the door, vibrating with anxiety. "Lauren doesn't know I'm here," he said. "If she finds out, she will leave me, or worse." "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "Because I saw the foreclosure notice," Evan said, "and I saw the way she looked when she came back from meeting Rourke yesterday. She is not herself. Abby, she is trapped, and I can't watch her go to jail for these people." He put the drive on the table. "What is on it?" I asked. "Screenshots," Evan said. Lauren deleted the text from her phone, but she forgot about the cloud backup on the iPad. I downloaded everything before she could wipe it. I plugged the drive into my laptop. I opened the folder. There were dozens of images, text threads between Lauren and a contact listed only as R. October 20th. R. "We need to move the timeline up. The lenders are getting impatient." Lauren. "I can't. She is still in the hospital. I can't ask her now." R. "You don't need to ask. You just need to facilitate. Remember the debt." Lauren. "We can make the Lark linen problem go away." I looked up at Evan. "Lark and linen?" "Her boutique," Evan said, rubbing his face. "She opened it 3 years ago in Portland. High-end linens, imported fabrics. She wanted to be a businesswoman. She wanted to prove to everyone she wasn't just a trophy wife." I didn't know. I said, "Nobody knew." Evan said, "She took out loans, high-interest business loans. She hid them from me. She hid them from Grandma. The business failed in 6 months. Abby, she was in the hole for $80,000. $80,000? And then she met Rourke." Evan said, "He found her. I don't know how. Maybe he buys debt lists. He told her he could help her consolidate. He gave her a personal loan to cover the business debt. But the interest, it was predatory. Within a year, it had ballooned to $200,000. I stared at him. She didn't do this for greed. She did it because she was being extorted. They own her." "Abby," Evan said. "They told her the only way to clear the ledger was to give them the house. They said the equity in the farmhouse would cover everything and leave us with a profit. They groomed her for this." I looked back at the screen. November 15th. R. "The filing is rejected. Messy signature. You need to come in." Lauren. "I can't do that. That is illegal." R. "You are already illegal." Lauren. "You took the advance. Come in and sign the curative, or we call the note due tomorrow. Do you want Evan to know about the second mortgage?" I felt a sick mixture of pity and rage. They had cornered her. They had used her vanity and her failure to build a cage. And then they had handed her the key, which just happened to be the deed to my home. "This proves Rourke coerced her." I said, "It proves she did it." Evan said, "But it also proves she wasn't the architect." Abby, please, use this to stop North Bay. But try not to destroy her. She is still your sister." He turned to leave. "Evan," I said. He stopped. "Does she know you have this?" "No," he said. "And if Rourke finds out, I don't know what he will do. Be careful. Abby, these aren't just bankers. They are sharks." He slipped out into the night. leaving me with the evidence that would win my case and likely ruin my sister's life. The next morning, I went into town to buy milk. It was a mistake. The rumor mill in Gray Harbor had turned from a simmer to a boil. I walked into the post office to check my box, and the silence that fell over the room was absolute. Mrs. Gable, who had taught me third-grade math, looked at me over her glasses. "Getting mail for the house you are stealing." "Abigail?" she asked. Her voice was loud, echoing in the small lobby. I stopped. "Excuse me?" "We heard," she said, sniffing. "We heard you are suing to make poor Lauren homeless. That girl has financial troubles, and instead of helping her, you are dragging her through court." "That is not true," I said, my face burning. "It is what people are saying," she said, "that you want the house all to yourself because you never got married. Bitter. That is what it is. Just bitter." I looked around. 3 other people were staring at me. Their faces were closed, judgmental. To them, I was the villain. I was the cold, childless career woman attacking the struggling sister who just wanted to support her family. They didn't know about the forgery. They didn't know about the extortion. They just knew the story Lauren had planted. I grabbed my mail and walked out, my head high. But inside I was crumbling. It was a special kind of loneliness, standing on the side of the truth while everyone else threw stones. I was the reasonable one. I was the one with the law on my side. But in the court of public opinion, drama was always louder than evidence. I got back to the car and threw the mail on the seat. A letter slid out from the stack. It wasn't a bill. It was a notification from Dunridge Lending. Notice of intent to foreclose. I tore it open. Default on loan 88920. Amount due $154,300. Unless full payment is received within 30 days, the lender will exercise its right to sell the property at public auction. I stared at the paper, the lien. Lauren hadn't made a single payment on the loan she took out against the house. Why would she? She thought North Bay was going to buy it and pay it off, but the lawsuit had frozen everything. Now, the lender, another arm of this hydra, no doubt, was calling the bluff. I could win the court case. I could prove the deed was forged. I could send Lauren to jail, and it wouldn't matter, because in 30 days, the bank was going to take the house anyway. I drove home, the panic rising in my throat like bile. I needed to find something else, something that proved Grandma never agreed to this debt. I went up to the attic. I had packed away Grandma's personal items in a steamer trunk, clothes, photo albums, knickknacks. I dug through the layers of wool sweaters and lace doilies. At the bottom, wrapped in a scarf, was her old cell phone. It was a simple flip phone, red, with big buttons. She had hated using it, but she kept it charged for emergencies. I found the charger cord in a box of tangled wires. I plugged it in. I sat on the dusty floorboards, watching the battery icon blink. "Come on, Grandma," I whispered. "Talk to me." The screen lit up. I went to the messages. Empty. She never texted. I went to the call log, mostly me, a few calls to Dr. Warren, and then a series of calls from a number I didn't recognize. Unknown. I went to the drafts folder. There were 2 messages, saved, but never sent. Grandma struggled with the send button. She often wrote things and thought they went out, but they just sat there. Draft 1, October 12th. Lauren keeps bringing strangers to my porch, men in suits. They look at the roof. I told them to go away. I am scared. Draft 2, October 30th. If anything happens to me, check the title company. They called me. Said I signed something. I didn't sign anything. I want Abby to know. I held the phone to my chest and cried. She had known. In those final, foggy weeks, she had been fighting them off alone. She had tried to warn me. I wiped my eyes. I had the recording. I had the texts. I had the phone. I had enough to bury them. But the foreclosure notice on the passenger seat of my car was a ticking clock. I called Mara. "We have a problem." I said, "What is it?" "Dunridge Lending is foreclosing." I said, "We have 30 days." Mara cursed softly. "They are accelerating. They know we are getting close to the truth." So they are trying to liquidate the asset before the judgment comes down. What do we do? I asked. We need an injunction. Mara said, a hard stop. But to get that, we need to show the judge everything. The recording, the texts, the criminal behavior. We can't hold back to protect Lauren anymore. If we don't drop the hammer now, you lose the house. I looked out the attic window at the gray ocean churning against the rocks. Drop it, I said. The silence on the other end was heavy. Okay, Mara said. I will draft the affidavit. We are going to war. I hung up. I looked at the little red phone in my hand. I am sorry. Lauren, I whispered to the empty room, but you picked the wrong side. I stood up, dusting off my knees. The time for being the quiet, resilient sister was over. They wanted to play games with my home? They wanted to turn my blood ties into a business transaction? Fine, but they were about to learn that Abigail Jackson didn't just fix houses. I knew how to demolish them, too. The gavel did not bang. That is a myth from television. In the hushed courtroom of the Cumberland County Superior Court, the judge simply set down his pen and looked over his spectacles at the attorney representing Dunridge Lending. I am granting the temporary injunction, the judge said, his voice dry as old parchment. All foreclosure proceedings regarding the property at 442 Ocean View Lane are stayed pending the resolution of the title dispute. I let out a breath that felt like it had been trapped in my lungs for a month. Beside me, Mara Klein didn't smile. She just nodded, scribbling a note on her legal pad. We walked out into the corridor, the marble floors echoing with the footsteps of lawyers and defendants. It is a Band-Aid. Abigail, Mara said quietly as we reached the elevator. It stops the bleeding, but it doesn't heal the wound. If we lose the title case, or if we make one procedural error, the injunction lifts, and then the financial machinery restarts. I know, I said, but it buys us time. Time is only useful if we use it to find a weapon. Mara replied. We found that weapon 2 days later, in a deposition room that smelled of stale coffee and furniture polish. We had subpoenaed the staff of Harbor Point Title Services. Most of them were stonewalling, coached by their expensive corporate counsel to recall absolutely nothing about the month of November. But then came Kevin Miller. Kevin was 24, wearing a suit that was slightly too large for him, and he looked like he was about to vomit. He was a junior processing clerk. He sat across the table, his eyes darting between Mara and the Harbor Point attorney, a man named Mr. Sterling, who sat with his arms crossed like a bouncer. Mr. Miller, Mara asked, her voice deceptively gentle. Did you have access to the digital filing queue on November 14th? I think so, Kevin stammered. And did you notice any irregularities with the Jackson file? Objection, Sterling barked. Calls for speculation. I am asking for his observation, not his opinion. Mara shot back without looking at him. Kevin? Kevin swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed. There were files we weren't supposed to touch, he said softly. Sterling cleared his throat, a loud, warning sound. Kevin flinched, but he kept looking at Mara. He looked at her like she was a lifeline. What do you mean? Files you weren't supposed to touch? Mara asked. They were flagged, Kevin said, his voice trembling. In the system, they had a code. Project N. We were told that if a file had that code, we had to route it directly to the supervisor, even if there were errors, even if signatures were missing. We were told to bypass the quality control check. And who was the supervisor? Mara asked. Sterling leaned forward. I advise you to be very careful. Mr. Miller? Kevin looked at Sterling, then at me. I was sitting quietly in the corner, staring at him. I think he saw the exhaustion in my face. I think he saw that I wasn't just a case number. It was Mr. Rourke. Kevin said, Calvin Rourke. And did Mr. Rourke explain why these files were special? Kevin nodded. He said they were tied to a priority client. He said North Bay Renewal Partners brought in 40% of our quarterly revenue. And we didn't ask questions about North Bay files. The room went silent. The stenographer's keys clacked like gunfire. I felt a chill run down my spine. North Bay Renewal Partners. And how did Mr. Rourke refer to himself in internal notes? Mara asked. Did he use his full name? Kevin shook his head. No, he always signed his notes with just one letter. Which letter? R, Kevin said. Just R. I closed my eyes. The texts on Lauren's iPad. R. You don't need to ask. You just need to facilitate. The betrayal shifted in that moment. It wasn't just my sister being jealous or greedy. It wasn't just a family dispute gone wrong. My family was being used as a lever. We were cogs in a machine designed to strip assets from people who were too grieving or too broke to fight back. Calvin Rourke was the mechanic, and North Bay was the engine. When we left the deposition, Mara looked grim. We have the link, she said. Rourke is R. He is the bridge between the forgery and the developer. But proving he ordered the forgery is still a leap. We need to break him, or we need to break Lauren. Lauren broke first, but not in the way we expected. 3 nights later, I was at the farmhouse. The wind was howling off the Atlantic, battering the windows. I was in the kitchen, organizing the chaos of paperwork that had taken over my dining table. I saw headlights sweep across the wall. I went to the window. It was the white Range Rover. I debated not answering. I debated calling the police, but something in the way she got out of the car stopped me. She wasn't storming up the walk. She was trudging. She carried a box in her arms. I opened the door. Lauren stood there, shivering in the cold. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. "Can I come in?" she asked. Her voice was brittle. I stepped back. She walked into the kitchen and set the box on the table, right on top of a stack of legal briefs. "What is this?" I asked. She opened the box. It was full of photo albums. I was going through things at the apartment. She said, "I found these. I thought you might want them." She pulled out a photo. It was the 2 of us, aged 6 and 8, building a sandcastle on the beach in front of this very house. Grandma was in the background, sitting in a lawn chair, laughing. "We were happy then," Lauren said softly. "Weren't we?" I looked at the photo. I remembered that day. Lauren had kicked the castle down 5 minutes later because I made a tower taller than hers. We were kids. "Lauren," I said, "what are you doing here?" Lauren looked up at me. Tears spilled over her lashes, tracking through her foundation. "I can't do this anymore." "Abby," she said, "the lawyers, the fighting, the town talking about us. It is killing me. I can't sleep. I can't eat." "Then stop it," I said. "Withdraw the claim. Tell the truth." Lauren reached out and took my hand. Her fingers were cold. "I can't just withdraw," she said urgently. "It is too late for that, but we can end it, tonight." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded document. "Derek drafted this," she said. "It is a new settlement, better than the last one. We sell the house to North Bay. They pay off the debts, my debts, and the mortgage, and we split the remainder. You walk away with $50,000. Abby, free and clear, no more court, no more risk. We can just be sisters again." I pulled my hand away as if she had burned me. "You came here to negotiate?" I asked, my voice rising. "You bring me pictures of Grandma. You cry about our childhood, and then you pull a contract out of your pocket? It is the only way out," Lauren cried. "You don't understand. If we don't settle, they are going to destroy us, both of us." "Who is they?" "Lauren?" I asked. "Calvin Rourke?" She flinched. The color drained from her face completely. "You know his name?" she whispered. "I know everything," I said. "I know about the tracing. I know about the texts. I know about the debt you hid from Evan. I know you are not the owner of this house. Lauren, you are a hostage." Lauren slumped into the chair, burying her face in her hands. "They said they would hurt Evan," she sobbed. "They said they would ruin his credit, seize his business assets. I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice," I said. "You could have come to me. You could have told me you were in trouble. We could have figured it out. But instead, you stole the one thing Grandma trusted me to keep safe." I picked up the settlement offer and ripped it in half. "I am not signing this," I said. "Abby, please," Lauren begged. "No," I said, "but I will offer you something else. a lifeline. I leaned over the table, looking down at her. You go to Mara's office tomorrow, I said. You sit for a deposition, and you tell the truth. You tell them Rourke made you do it. You tell them about the threats. If you help me take down Harbor Point and North Bay, I will drop the punitive damages against you. I won't sue you for fraud. I will help you unwind the liens. Lauren stared at me. Hope flickered in her eyes for a second, followed immediately by a crushing, paralyzed fear. I can't, she whispered. Rourke said if I talked, he would release the financial records. He would show the world I committed bank fraud on the original business loans. I will go to jail. Abby, you might go to jail anyway, I shouted. Do you think Rourke is going to protect you when this goes south? He is going to cut you loose. He is going to blame it all on the greedy sister. Lauren stood up. She was shaking her head. I can't risk it, she said. I have to protect Evan. She grabbed the box of photos and clutched it to her chest like a shield. Just take the deal. Abby, she said, backing toward the door. Please, before it gets worse. She fled into the night. I watched her go, realizing that fear was a stronger force than love. Fear could make you burn down your own home just to stay warm. The next day, the circle tightened. I met Nina for lunch at the bakery, needing a friendly face. She brought someone with her, a woman with sharp eyes and hair pulled back in a severe bun. Abby, this is my cousin Tessa, Nina said. She is a paralegal over in York County. Hi, I said, confused. Tessa didn't waste time on pleasantries. She put a folder on the table. Nina told me what is happening, Tessa said. The missing notary, the system migration excuse. It sounded familiar. Familiar how? I asked. I did some digging in the public records for York and Cumberland counties, Tessa said. Just looking for patterns. Look at this. She spread out 3 printouts. They were property dispute cases from the last 2 years. Case 1, Tessa said, pointing, an elderly man in Wells. Died without a will. Suddenly a deed appears transferring the farm to a nephew who hasn't visited in 20 years. The nephew sells to a shell company linked to North Bay within a month. The family contests it. The title company claims the original records were lost in a server update. Case 2. She continued. A widow in Scarborough. She claims she never signed a quitclaim. The notary? Unavailable. The title company? Harbor Point. The buyer? North Bay Renewal. I looked at the papers. It was a playbook. They are targeting vulnerable estates, Tessa said. They look for properties with high equity and messy family dynamics. They insert themselves, fabricate the paperwork, and wash the title through Harbor Point. By the time the family figures it out, the property is already sold and developed into condos. This isn't just me, I whispered. No, Tessa said. It is a racket, and that is good for you. How is that good? I asked. Because it proves pattern and practice, Tessa said. If it is just you versus your sister, it is a drama. If it is you versus a criminal enterprise with a history of identical fraud, it is a RICO case. It makes the judge look at the evidence differently. I took the folder. Thank you. Tessa. Mara was ecstatic when I showed her the research. This changes the strategy, she said, pacing her office. We stop trying to prove you are the favorite granddaughter. That is emotional. We start proving that Harbor Point is a criminal organization. We make the fraud the star of the show. But amidst the strategic pivots, the emotional toll was mounting. Evan found me that afternoon. He didn't come to the house. He waited by my car in the grocery store parking lot. He looked worse than before. He hadn't shaved in days. Did she come to see you? Evan asked. Yes, I said, loading my bags. She tried to get me to settle. I told her not to. Evan said, I told her it wouldn't work. Evan, I said, stopping. She is terrified. She thinks Rourke is going to destroy you. Evan laughed, a sound devoid of humor. He already has. Abby. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. I found this on her laptop, he said, hidden in a subfolder. It is a draft agreement. Between Lauren and North Bay. I took it. It was dated 3 months ago. Subject to the successful acquisition of title for 442 Ocean View Lane. North Bay Renewal Partners agrees to assume and satisfy all outstanding liabilities of Lark Linen, LLC, up to the amount of $200,000. It was a quid pro quo, a contract for betrayal. I didn't sign anything, Evan said quietly. I didn't know about this specific document until last night, but I knew she was talking to them. I knew she was desperate, and I didn't stop it fast enough. I let her drive the car off the cliff because I was too scared to grab the wheel. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. She is not evil, Abby. She is weak, and she is drowning. Weakness causes just as much damage as evil. Evan, I said, sometimes more. I drove home with the weight of the world on my passenger seat. The lawsuit, the foreclosure, the criminal conspiracy. It was too much noise. I walked into the farmhouse. It was silent. The sun was setting, casting long, golden shadows across the floorboards. I went into the kitchen. I stood by the butcher block island. This was where Grandma used to make apple pie. I could almost smell the cinnamon and flour. I could see her hands, dusted white, rolling out the crust. You fixed what others abandoned. I had clung to that sentence like a life raft. I had believed that if I just loved the house enough, if I just worked hard enough, it would love me back. I believed that home was a reward for loyalty. But standing there, watching the light fade, I realized something shattering. The house didn't care. The house was wood and glass and stone. It didn't know I loved it. It didn't know Lauren betrayed it. It was just a thing that could be stolen, sold, and demolished. I had been chasing home as a guarantee of love. I thought if I owned the deed, I owned the feeling of belonging, but the deed was just paper. And the love was gone. Grandma was dead. My sister was an enemy. My family was a traitor. I slid down to the floor, leaning my back against the cabinets. I wept, not the angry tears of the last few weeks, but the deep, hollow sobbing of someone who realizes that even if they win, they have lost. I must have fallen asleep on the floor, or maybe I just disassociated for hours. I woke up to a sound. It wasn't the wind, it was the distinct crunch of glass breaking. I sat up, my heart hammering against my ribs. The kitchen was pitch black. I heard footsteps in the living room, heavy boots on the hardwood. I scrambled up, grabbing a heavy cast-iron skillet from the drying rack. I pressed myself against the wall, listening. They weren't moving like thieves looking for jewelry. They were moving with purpose. I heard the drawer of the hallway console table slide open. I heard papers being shuffled. Then I heard them on the stairs. Going up. My bedroom. The office. I should have run out the back door. But a surge of protective rage took over. This was my house. I crept into the hallway. I saw the beam of a flashlight sweeping across the top of the landing. Check the closet. A male voice whispered. The trunk. They knew. They knew exactly where I kept things. I heard the heavy lid of the steamer trunk creak open. The trunk where I had found Grandma's phone. Got it, the voice said. And the drive? Yeah. Laptop case. I realized then what was happening. They weren't stealing valuables. They were sanitizing the crime scene. I stepped on a loose floorboard. Creak, the flashlight beam snapped down the stairs, blinding me. Hey, the voice shouted. I didn't wait. I turned and ran for the back door. I threw the bolt and scrambled out onto the porch, jumping the steps and sprinting into the darkness of the yard. I didn't stop until I reached the tree line. I crouched behind an old oak, shivering, clutching the cold iron skillet to my chest. I watched the house. 2 figures came out the front door. They were dressed in black, wearing masks. They moved quickly to a dark sedan parked down the road. Engines off. They got in and drove away. No headlights until they hit the main road. I waited 5 minutes, my breath coming in jagged gasps. Then I walked back to the house. The back door was open. The kitchen window was shattered. I walked through the rooms. The TV was still there. My laptop was still on the desk, but the flash drive Evan had given me, which I had left plugged in, was gone. I ran upstairs to the attic. The steamer trunk was open. Grandma's clothes were tossed on the floor. The red flip phone was gone. I ran to my bedroom nightstand, where I kept the copy of Grandma's letter from the lockbox. Gone. They had taken it all. The phone with the drafts, the flash drive with the texts, the letter establishing intent. They had stripped me of my evidence on the eve of the trial. I stood in the center of the ravaged room, the cold night air blowing in through the broken window. It was a message, loud and clear: we are watching, and we can take whatever we want. I walked downstairs and picked up my own phone. My hands were steady now. The fear had burned off, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. I dialed Mara. She answered on the second ring. "Abigail? It is midnight. They broke in." I said, "What? Are you okay? Call the police." "I will," I said. "But listen to me. They took the phone. They took the drive. They took the letter. Oh my God," Mara whispered. "We lost the physical evidence." "No," I said. "We didn't lose it. They stole it, and that means they are desperate." "Abigail, without that evidence, the trial." "Mara," I cut her off. "I don't care about the evidence anymore. They made a mistake." "What mistake?" "They didn't take me," I said. I looked at the empty spot on the table where the flash drive had been. I memorized the texts. "Mara, I transcribed the letter, and I know the truth. They think by taking the objects, they take the power. But they just made me the only witness left." I hung up. I looked around the dark kitchen. The home I had been fighting for was violated. It was no longer a sanctuary. It was a battlefield, and I was the last soldier standing. I picked up the broom and started sweeping up the glass. I had a trial to attend in the morning, and I wasn't going to let them see me bleed. The courtroom of the Gray Harbor Superior Court smelled of lemon polish and old fear. It was a smell I had come to associate with the disintegration of my family: the high ceilings, the heavy oak benches, the portraits of dead judges staring down from the walls. It was all designed to intimidate, to remind you that your personal tragedy was just another case number on the docket. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Mara Klein. My hands were folded in my lap, knuckles white. The break-in the night before had left me feeling raw, exposed, and strangely dangerous. They had stolen the physical evidence: Grandma's phone, the flash drive, the letter, but they hadn't stolen my memory, and they hadn't stolen the people who were waiting in the hallway. Lauren sat at the defense table. She looked immaculate. She was wearing a navy blue suit, modest and expensive. Her hair was pulled back in a soft chignon. She didn't look like a woman who had traced a dead woman's signature or conspired with predatory lenders. She looked like the grieving, responsible older sister. She wouldn't look at me. Judge Caldwell took the bench. He was a stern man with a reputation for hating wasted time. "Docket number 459. He read, "Jackson versus Jackson et al." Derek Voss stood up. He was smooth, confident. He moved with the easy arrogance of a man who thought the theft of the evidence had crippled our case. "Your Honor," he began, "this is a simple case of a family dispute. One sister attempting to honor the wishes of a grandmother, and another sister, grieving and confused, attempting to obstruct the rightful transfer of property. We intend to show that the deed recorded on November 14th is valid, legal, and final." Mara stood up. Her voice was quieter, sharper. "Your Honor, we intend to prove that the deed is a forgery, created as part of a criminal conspiracy involving the defendant, Harbor Point Title Services, and North Bay Renewal Partners." Voss chuckled, a low, dismissive sound meant for the gallery. Lauren took the stand first. She was good. I had to give her that. She spoke softly, her voice trembling just enough to suggest heartbreak, but remaining steady enough to suggest truth. "Grandma was worried about Abigail." Lauren told the jury, looking earnestly at them. "She told me, 'Lauren, you are the strong one. I need you to take the house so you can look after your sister.' She wanted fairness. She knew Abigail was emotional. She knew Abigail might not be able to handle the financial responsibility. And the deed?" Voss asked gently. "She signed it," Lauren said. "She signed it right in front of me. She held my hand and said she was glad it was finally done." I felt a surge of bile in my throat. It was a beautiful lie, wrapped in the language of care. She was using Grandma's love as a shield for her own extortion. Voss sat down. looking satisfied. Mara stood up. She didn't walk to the podium. She stood right at our table, holding a single piece of paper. "Ms. Jackson," Mara said, "you stated your grandmother signed the deed on November 14th. Is that correct?" "Yes," Lauren said. "And where did this signing take place?" "At her home," Lauren said. "In the kitchen." Mara picked up the paper. "I have here a certified medical record from Mercy Hospital," she said. "Admitted into evidence as Exhibit C. It is the intensivist's log for November 14th. Can you read the highlighted line? Ms. Jackson?" Lauren squinted. She hesitated. "Read it, please," Mara said. "Patient sedated and intubated." Lauren read, her voice barely a whisper. "Oxygen saturation 88%. Ventilator settings adjusted." "Thank you," Mara said. "So, on the day you claim your grandmother was sitting in her kitchen holding your hand and signing legal documents, she was actually in a medically induced coma, attached to a life support machine 20 miles away. How do you explain that?" Lauren blinked rapidly. Her composure slipped. "Just a fraction. She must have signed it before." Lauren stammered. "Maybe the date was wrong." "Ah," Mara said. "So the deed is inaccurate?" I don't know. I just know she wanted me to have it." Mara moved on. Relentless. "Let's talk about the filing sequence," she said. "We have records from the county registry. The deed you filed has a sequence number that does not match the chronological intake log. It was uploaded out of order. Why was the original file deleted and replaced?" "Ms. Jackson?" "I don't know how the registry works," Lauren said, her voice rising. "I just signed what the title company gave me." "So you signed something?" Mara asked. "I thought you said Grandma signed it." Lauren froze. She realized the trap too late. I signed the acceptance," she said quickly. Mara let the silence hang for 5 seconds. It felt like an hour. No further questions. Lauren stepped down. She looked pale. The narrative was cracked, but it wasn't broken. She could still claim ignorance. She could still claim it was a clerical error. Then Mara called Evan Mercer. A murmur went through the courtroom. Husbands testifying against wives was rare. It was messy. Lauren's head snapped up. She stared at Evan as he walked to the stand. Her eyes were wide, pleading. "Don't do this." Evan looked terrible. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a month. He took the oath, his hand shaking on the Bible. "Mr. Mercer," Mara asked, "are you aware of your wife's financial situation prior to the death of Eleanor Jackson?" Voss jumped up. "Objection! Relevance! Spousal privilege!" "Your Honor," Mara said coolly. "Mr. Mercer is testifying voluntarily regarding a criminal conspiracy that involves third parties. Privilege does not apply to the furtherance of a crime." "Overruled," the judge said. "Answer the question." Evan looked at Lauren. He looked at the pain in her face, and for a second, I thought he would fold. I thought he would protect her. Then he looked at me. He looked at the empty seat where the stolen evidence should have been. "Yes," Evan said. His voice was raspy. Lauren was in debt. Serious debt. Her business, Larkin Linen, had failed. She owed over $200,000 to private lenders. And how did she plan to pay this debt? Mara asked. "She entered into an agreement," Evan said, "with a man named Calvin Rourke and a company called North Bay Renewal." Lauren let out a small, strangled sob. Voss put a hand on her arm to silence her. What was the nature of this agreement? Evan took a breath. "They agreed to wipe out her debt," he said, "in exchange for the house. She had to get the title. They told her. They told her if she didn't get the title, they would bankrupt us." Mara walked to the evidence table. "Mr. Mercer, did you see text messages between your wife and a contact labeled R?" "Yes," Evan said. "Can you tell the court what those messages said?" Voss stood up again. "Objection. The messages are not in evidence. The plaintiff claims they were stolen. This is hearsay." Mara turned to the judge. The witness viewed the messages personally. He is testifying to his direct observation. The fact that the physical drive was stolen from the plaintiff's home last night, in a break-in that is currently under police investigation, does not negate his memory. The judge looked at Voss, his eyes narrowing. "I will allow it," the judge said. "Proceed." Evan looked down at his hands. One message said, "You don't need to ask. You just need to facilitate." Another said, "Sign the curative or we call the note due." "And who is R?" Mara asked. Evan looked at the back of the courtroom. "I believe it is him," he said. He pointed. Sitting in the back row, looking bored and irritated, was a man in a gray suit, Calvin Rourke. He didn't flinch. He just stared back at Evan with dead, shark-like eyes. "Thank you. Mr. Mercer," Mara said. As Evan walked past the defense table, Lauren wouldn't look at him. She was staring at the table, tears sliding silently down her face. The betrayal was absolute, but so was the truth. Next was Trudy Pell. Trudy was the nail in the coffin. She was terrified. Yes, but her fear of the law had finally outweighed her fear of Rourke. She sat in the witness box, small and trembling in a cardigan that was 2 sizes too big. "Ms. Pell," Mara asked, "did you notarize the deed in question?" "Yes," Trudy whispered. "Was Eleanor Jackson present when you applied your seal?" "No." "Did you ever meet Eleanor Jackson?" "No." Trudy took a tissue from her pocket and twisted it. "Who gave you the document?" Mara asked. "Mr. Rourke," Trudy said. "My supervisor." "And did anyone else sign the document in your presence?" Trudy looked at Lauren. "Yes," she said. "Lauren Jackson came in 2 weeks after the date on the deed. Rourke told her the first signature was messy. He told her to trace it." A gasp went through the gallery. Actual, audible shock. Forgery was a word lawyers used. Tracing was a physical act of deceit that everyone could visualize. "She traced it?" Mara clarified. "Yes," Trudy said. "She sat at the conference table. She was crying, but she did it, and then Rourke made me swap the files in the registry system." The judge leaned forward. He looked at Trudy. "You swapped the files?" the judge asked. "You altered the public record?" "Yes, Your Honor," Trudy said, her voice shaking. "I had the admin code. Rourke made me do it." The judge sat back. His face was like granite. He looked at Harbor Point's attorney, Mr. Sterling, who was suddenly very busy shuffling papers. Voss declined to cross-examine Trudy. There was no point. The ship was sinking, and he knew it. Finally, "We called Calvin Rourke." Rourke walked to the stand with an air of annoyed inconvenience. He adjusted his tie. He swore to tell the truth with a smirk. "Mr. Rourke," Mara said, "you heard the testimony. Did you instruct Lauren Jackson to forge a deed?" "Absolutely not," Rourke said smoothly. His voice was deep, practiced. "Ms. Pell is a disgruntled former employee. She was fired for incompetence. I imagine she is making up stories to cover her own malpractice." "And the text messages?" Mara asked. "The ones Mr. Mercer saw?" "Fabrications," Rourke said, "or misinterpretations. I often advise clients on financial restructuring. I never coerced anyone. And North Bay Renewal Partners? Do you have a relationship with them?" "We do business," Rourke said, shrugging. "They are a client. Standard arm's-length transactions." Mara walked back to our table. She picked up a thin folder. This wasn't from the stolen stash. This was the result of the subpoena to the third-party email archive service. The one Tessa, the paralegal, had helped us find Mr. Rourke, Mara said. Harbor Point claimed their internal emails were lost in a system migration. However, your IT vendor backs up all traffic to an off-site cloud server in Arizona. We obtained these yesterday. Rourke's smirk vanished. "I have an email here from you to the CEO of North Bay Renewal, dated November 15th. Mara said, subject line, "The Jackson problem." She began to read. "The old lady died before we got the wet ink. The sister is soft. I am bringing her in to fix the signature. Once the curative is filed, we can accelerate the loan and foreclose by January. Clean and simple." Mara looked up. "Is this your email address, Mr. Rourke?" Rourke stared at the paper. His face turned a mottled red. He didn't answer. "Answer the question," the judge barked. I don't recall sending that." Rourke muttered. The silence in the room was heavy. It was the sound of a predator being caught in his own trap. Mara sat down. The defense rested. They had nothing. No witnesses, no alternate theory, just the wreckage of their own lies. But before the judge could rule, Lauren stood up. Voss tried to grab her arm. "Sit down," he hissed. "No," Lauren shouted. She pulled away from him. She looked wild. Her hair had come loose from the chignon. She looked at the judge. "He is lying," she screamed, pointing at Rourke. "He told me he would help. He said it was standard procedure." "Lauren," Voss warned. "Shut up," Lauren yelled at her lawyer. She turned to the gallery. She looked at me. "They said if I didn't do it, they would take Evan and me down," she cried. Her voice broke, shattering into a sob that echoed off the high ceiling. "They had the loan papers. They had the liens on the business. Rourke said he would garnish everything we owned. He said we would be on the street. I didn't want the house. I just wanted the debt to stop." She collapsed into her chair, burying her face in her arms, her shoulders shaking with violent, ugly sobs. It wasn't an excuse. It didn't make what she did right. She had still stolen from me. She had still lied. But in that moment, she wasn't the villain anymore. She was just a terrified woman who had made one bad decision and then spent a year feeding it with more bad decisions until it ate her alive. The courtroom was silent, save for her weeping. Judge Caldwell cleared his throat. He looked tired. "I have heard enough," he said. He didn't retire to his chambers. He ruled from the bench. "The court finds the deed recorded in Book 4502, page 112, to be invalid and fraudulent," he said. His voice rang out, clear and final. "The property at 442 Ocean View Lane is the sole legal property of Abigail Jackson." I closed my eyes. The relief was so intense it felt like pain. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "I am ordering the Registry of Deeds to strike the fraudulent filing. All liens placed against the property by Dunridge Lending or any entity associated with the defendant, Lauren Jackson, are hereby declared void, as they were secured through fraud." He paused. He looked at Rourke. He looked at Lauren, regarding the criminal implications of the testimony heard today. He said slowly, "This court is forwarding the full transcript and all admitted evidence to the district attorney's office for immediate review. I am not issuing a bench warrant at this moment, but I strongly suggest that Mr. Rourke and Ms. Jackson do not leave the jurisdiction." He banged the gavel. "Court is adjourned." It was over. People started moving. Rourke stormed out, his lawyer trailing him, already on the phone. Evan sat still, his head in his hands. I stood up. My legs felt like jelly. Mara hugged me. A rare, unprofessional embrace. "You did it, Abigail," she whispered. "You saved the house." I looked at Lauren. She was sitting alone at the defense table. Voss was packing his briefcase, ignoring her. She looked like a statue of ruin. I walked over to her. I didn't know why. Maybe because we had shared a womb. Maybe because I had won, and I could afford to be the one who walked over. "Lauren," I said. She looked up. Her mascara was smeared, her eyes bloodshot. She looked at me with a mixture of hatred and exhaustion. "Are you happy?" she whispered. "No." I said, "I am not happy. I am just done. You destroyed me," she hissed. The venom was back. The fear had turned into lashing out. "Evan is going to leave me. I am going to be prosecuted. My life is over. You destroyed yourself." "Lauren," I said gently, "I just turned on the lights." She stood up, grabbing her purse. She leaned in close, her breath smelling of stale mints and panic. "You didn't win. Abby," she said, "you think you won because you have the keys? You have nothing. No sister, no parents, no husband. You just have a pile of wood and memories of dead people." She pulled back, her eyes cold. "You made yourself alone," she said. "Enjoy the silence." She turned and walked out, her heels clicking a sharp, lonely rhythm on the marble floor. I watched her go. Her words were meant to cut, and they did. They sliced right through the victory and settled in the soft, vulnerable part of my heart. She was right. I was alone. I walked out of the courthouse into the bright, blinding winter sun. The air was cold and clean. I drove back to the farmhouse. The driveway was the same. The porch was the same. The ocean was the same, crashing against the rocks with its eternal indifference. I walked inside. The kitchen window was boarded up where the plywood covered the break-in damage. The floor was clean. I had swept the glass. I stood in the center of the room. "I own it," I said aloud. The voice echoed. There was no one to hear it. No grandma to smile and offer me tea. No Nina to cheer. No Lauren to argue with. Just the house. I walked through the rooms. I touched the walls. I ran my hand along the banister. It felt solid. It felt mine. But Lauren's words lingered. "You made yourself alone." I realized then that justice wasn't a feeling of fullness. It was just a clearing of the debris. It didn't rebuild the bridge. It just removed the troll. I still had to live on the island. I went to the front door to check the mail. I needed routine. I needed the mundane act of checking for bills to ground me. The mailbox was empty, except for a single white envelope. No stamp. It had been hand-delivered. My name wasn't on it. I opened it standing on the porch, the wind whipping my hair across my face. It was a single sheet of heavy, expensive paper. Offer to purchase. It was a standard real estate buy-sell agreement. The buyer was listed as Apex Holdings, LLC, a shell company I had never heard of. I looked at the price. $1,200,000. It was 3 times what the house was worth. It was an amount that would solve every problem I would ever have. It was a go-away price. I looked at the bottom of the page. There was no signature, just a typed note. "We don't lose properties. We only change timelines." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. It wasn't over. Rourke might be facing an investigation. Lauren might be ruined. But the machine? The machine was still running. North Bay Renewal, or whatever they called themselves next week, wasn't going to stop. They had infinite money and infinite patience. They were telling me that I could keep the house for now. But they would be waiting. They would wait for me to get tired. They would wait for the taxes to go up. They would wait for the loneliness to break me. I looked at the ocean. I looked at the house I had fought for, bled for, and destroyed my family for. I folded the paper and put it in my pocket. Let them wait. I walked back inside and closed the door. I threw the deadbolt. Click. I wasn't the same woman who had opened that certified letter 6 weeks ago. I wasn't the quiet project manager who just wanted to be safe. I was the woman who had stared down a syndicate and won. If they wanted the house, they could come and try to take it. But next time, I wouldn't be looking for a lawyer. I would be waiting at the gate. I picked up my phone. I dialed Nina. "Hey," I said when she answered. "It is over." "You won?" she screamed. "I won," I said. "But Nina?" "Yeah? Come over. Bring wine. I don't want to be alone tonight." I hung up. The court ruling was an ending. Yes. But looking at the boarded-up window and feeling the note in my pocket, I knew it was also a beginning, a new kind of fight, one where the enemy wasn't my sister, but something much bigger, and this time, I would choose the fight deliberately. Thank you so much for listening to Finally Your House is Mine, my sister declared in court. Writing Abigail's journey from betrayal to resilience has been an intense ride, and I hope you felt every twist and turn of the gavel. I would love to know where you are listening from. Please drop a comment below and tell me, are you tuning in from the bustling city, the quiet countryside, or somewhere in between? If you enjoyed this story and want more realistic, emotionally charged family dramas, please subscribe to Revenge Stories. I have many more tales of justice, secrets, and redemption waiting for you. Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Abigail made the right choice in the end? Would you have forgiven Lauren? Let's talk about it. Until next time, keep fighting for your truth.